I would like to introduce these very generous leading ladies who are joining me on the platform. And first is Kimberly Halbauer. Kim serves as the Regional President of Fifth Third Bank's Kentucky Market. That's a huge responsibility, and I think you're the first woman in that position, is that correct? In Kentucky. Yeah, well, Kentucky always takes longer than every other state. We know that. However, they were one of the first for infant hearing screening, so I guess I should give them credit for that one too. She's responsible for growth and strategic direction at the bank's commercial wealth and asset management and consumer divisions throughout the state of Kentucky. Kim earned a bachelor's degree in finance and business from Thomas More University and completed an executive leadership program at Yale University. So this is the second Yale reference we've had today. And she also spent 2 years as the vice chair for the Thomas More College Leadership Council, which was inaugurated a while back and served as an opportunity to bring individuals to connect with the university. Kim and her husband have 4 daughters. They live in Louisville, and so thank you for being here from Louisville. Next, we have, closest to me, Vashti Chatman of Big Village. She is the Global Chief Human Resources Officer at Big Village and has been a certified human resources professional and consultant for more than a decade. Over the years, she has spearheaded several strategic initiatives to shift culture and build a sense of belonging, to attract the best and brightest talent, to improve engagement, and to streamline human capital processes. She starts each day with prayer and gratitude and enjoys the simple things in life: family, a good laugh, great stories, and can also be found volunteering on the Healing Center board and advocating for all people. So you are lifting others as you rise. Good for you. And finally, Sue Ellen Sttuebing, who is connected with one of my favorite things in the whole world, public television. She has worked in the nonprofit management area for over 30 years and first came to CET in December 2006 to develop the major and planned giving programs. Since 2009, she has managed the development departments of both CET and Think TV. Prior to working at CET and Think, Sue Ellen spent 16 years working for the American Cancer Society, overseeing the development, education, patient support, and advocacy programs for Kentucky. Sue Ellen received her BA in Psychology and Social Work from Thomas More in 1984. So these are the ladies who are going to not lunch with you today. Let's give them a warm welcome. So we've heard a lot about innovators, and we also heard a lot about waking up each morning and being aware and seeking out opportunities, and also expecting the unexpected along the way, whether that's a good thing or a bad thing. So I'd like to start by asking each one of our panelists to address the following. When you were in college, did you have any idea that your job existed? Did you have any career thoughts that placed you in a leadership role? And what prompted you to become a leader in your profession? Who wants to start? Okay, Vashti, please.
All right, so is this thing on? No. Oh, I think I turned it off.
Yes, you did.
How about now? All right, so I love this question because I actually started all up until high school thinking I was going to be a football player and a ballerina and a singer like Diana Ross. So none of that happened. obviously. But I actually did know that HR was a profession. I knew that was a career. Through high school, I attended a program called Inroads, which was for really minority students who are underserved and were unlikely to have opportunities to get internships and go through and get a part of corporate America. This was an amazing program. I still volunteer and work with Inroads to this day, because I was one of those students who was told by my high school counselor that college was not for me. I graduated high school in 1996, so this was an odd conversation to have with any student, that college is not for you, you won't make it. I had great grades, above average ACTs and SATs, but for whatever reason, he felt like I was not cut out for college. Luckily, there was an amazing woman named Yolanda Alberts who met me after that counseling session and introduced me to Improse, which basically teaches you how to survive in corporate America. And some of the things that you don't think about in corporate America, like how to play golf and all these little things that will come up and how you negotiate deals. So I actually thought I was going to be a big-time executive. I actually did think I was going to be in leadership, but I didn't think it was going to be HR. I thought it was going to be a big marketing executive for GE Capital, because that's where my internship was and where I started my career. But I went to college, historically black college, which is Clark Atlanta University, and I ran into some tough times. I was putting myself through school. My father was not happy that I went away, and so cut me off. And I ended up homeless during my college tenure, and it got hard. And so I got to a point where there was some fraud at the university at that time. I ended up back in Cincinnati, and I thought it was just going to work and get back there. But I started with a company just to earn extra cash, which was Manpower. Manpower is one of the largest staffing firms. They also own Bright Management, and I was good at it. And I was making great money, good bonuses, and that was my entry into HR. But it was never part of my original path. But it was definitely one of those pivot moments that I was good at something, I was making money, and it just took off from there. And I had a lot of firsts with that organization. And it was one of, like I heard earlier from the speakers, I just would keep saying yes. And saying yes is what got me into my position that I'm in now, but never one that I expected.
That's great. So in high school and in college, I did not know that there were nonprofit jobs. I knew that there were jobs that made a difference at organizations, but I really wanted to come to I wanted to come to a school to major in something that would make a difference, because in high school, in my senior year, my father had cancer, and so he died in January of my senior year. And so after high school, looking for different schools to go to, I came and visited Thomas More, but I always thought that I'd go to UC. And so I got a scholarship my first year to Thomas More. And so I came in, and after going to a large public high school with like 1,000 kids, where I was a really shy, introverted kid, I came into Thomas More and I felt like I was home. I just loved it, So, in the leadership question, I've always been fortunate, both at Thomas More and also in my career with the American Cancer Society and my career with PBS, that I've always had these great women mentors. So I've always just tried to do a great job in the job that I've had. I've always been passionate. I heard a lot about passion this morning. I've always been passionate about the mission of the work that I've done. So I always did a great job, and that's how I got promoted up the line in both the American Cancer Society and with the PBS stations.
So I like to do things the difficult way. I don't ever take the easy way. That's never really been my path. So I like to accelerate things. I say I have 2 speeds, on and off. And so if I'm on, I'm on, and if I'm off, I'm off. And there's not really a middle. When people say slow down, I say I don't understand really what that means. But I started right out of high school as a part-time teller at Fifth Third Bank. And that was really more by necessity of needing a job. So I walked into a couple of banks. Fifth Third was crazy enough to give me a chance and hire me, and my life journey began. My funny part of the story from a leadership and a college perspective is my parents instilled in me this belief and understanding that it was very important to go to college. Neither of my parents were college educated. They were successful, but they were not college educated, and that was really important to them. So the fact that, you know, again, I like to do things fast and out of order. I had a baby, I needed a job, and so it was time to make some different decisions. So start at Fifth Third. Fifth Third had a wonderful reimbursement program that allowed me to go to college, and so I like to say I went through the accelerated program, and because I'm so smart, it took me 11 years to go through the accelerated program and graduate from Thomas More College with one of my, I think she's in this room, Beth Maley. There she is. So Beth and I were on the journey together. I don't think it took her 11 years. She's much smarter than me, but I think that time taught me, at the same time that I was ascending inside of our organization, I was also in school. And what I loved about my experience that was different, that really helped me as a leader, is that I had context. I always think to myself, if I had gone straight from high school to college, like many traditional people have, the meaningfulness of some of what I learned wouldn't have been the same. But the fact that I had applicability really helped me pay closer attention in some of the classes that might have been boring and there would have been reason to divert. But I really do think that was a big part of that journey. I also felt like at Thomas More, when I think about the school was still evolving and it was still trying to figure things out. And there were a lot of, there's a lot of criticism sometimes about adjunct professors versus full-time faculty. And I would say some of the adjunct professors that I had the opportunity to engage with were just amazing on the journey. So nothing against full-time faculty, very important, but they don't always love teaching until 10 o'clock at night on a Wednesday. So had some great leaders that helped inspire me through my journey.
Well, speaking of leaders, we've talked about mentors and being mentees and helping one another as we go through this journey of our profession and our lives. And so I think it would be appropriate right now to talk about any of the special people along the way who either guided or supported you in a way that led you to your current situation. Vashti, do you want to start again?
Sure. So I have so many. So this is going to be very tough to choose. I think the first, I'm passionate about mentorship. It's something that I bring to any organization that I'm a part of. We have mentorship at every level. It's not just for our fresh grads in our program. I work for a full service ed tech and marketing and programmatic firm. And we do mentorship even for the most senior talent and our executives. That's how important it is. I think everybody should have a mentor and a sponsor. So the reason why it's so important to me is because, if I hadn't had Yolanda Alberts, which I view as my first mentor, if I didn't have her to catch me after that terrible council session, I may not be on the path that led me here. So I do think that it's so important to find those people that you connect with. I will say that I have different types of mentors, right? I'm not traditional, very much like you. I do things the hard way. Most of my mentors were first-time mentors. They had never done it before. They didn't believe that they should. I've had amazing women that, the term now is imposter syndrome, that just didn't even know why they were chosen for mentors. And generally, the way they found me was after something traumatic. My mentor at GE Capital, my second mentor, who is now a professor at the University of Cincinnati, amazing woman, but she was, told that she was going to take on the black student that had just started at GE. This program was probably going to fail, but hey, it was after there was a nigger joke, and I'm going to say that, because that's the word that was used, and I was ready to fight. And she grabbed me up and she said, "No, don't do that. Let me show you how this is done. And you take that, and and again, anger, bottle that up, and let's talk about how you're going to use that." Those are the types of people that have grabbed onto me. And she taught me that sometimes, even when the model is bad, there's good that you can get from that. So whenever I take this into the corporate world, I've always used that. And not only do I work with the great mentors, but I work with those who aren't so great, because you can learn from all models, good or bad. And I always say, nothing's good, nothing's bad, it just is. What are you going to do with that? And I learned that from all of the amazing women that has mentored me throughout my career. So I'm passionate about mentorship.
So thank you. So I'm also really passionate about mentorship. So the reason I stayed at Thomas More, I got a scholarship my first year, and then I was going to head over to UC. And it was so warm and embracing, this environment, to me as a shy kid coming out of this big high school who had just lost her father. So Bob Berger, I'm dating myself. Bob Berger was the social work professor at the time. He was amazing. My psychology professor, Dr. Porter, was also amazing, took me under his wing. And I wasn't a sociology major, but the sociology instructor, Marilyn Glover, she also, I know, wonderful woman. So took me under her wing. And so when my first year was over here, I was like, I can't go anywhere. This is my home. So then when I went into my first career with the American Cancer Society, a good Southern belle, her name is Elaine Gordon, we're still friends today, she took me under her wing and taught me a whole lot. And then PBS, the woman who hired me, her name was Susan Howarth, and she was a dynamic woman who had spent 40 years with PBS stations throughout the country. I loved her. She died in 2018 of cancer, and now I'm one of 4 trustees that serves on her foundation board, so I continue her legacy. But mentorship was so important to me, so when I'm asked to be a mentor, and usually it's at least once a year, somebody comes and says, will you be a mentor because of my relationship with just PBS, the Development Advisory Council, and then also the Planned Giving Council over in Cincinnati. So I'm usually mentoring a person at least once a year. I always learn more from them. And then my team, I'm a mentor to several of my staff, although I encourage them to go and get other mentors. I might not be the right person for them. It's a relationship just like any other relationship in your life. So, but I always say yes, and I always learn more from my mentees than maybe they learn from me. So it's always a good experience.
Just to follow up on that, I would say every relationship that I have, I feel like I can learn as much from somebody as they can maybe learn from me. And if we can have those mutually beneficial interactions, and you think about every interaction you have as an opportunity to learn. Sometimes those opportunities are good, and sometimes they are not good. But I've learned as much from my not good opportunities of working with people on the journey that I don't want to be like as those that I do. But just as I think about mentorship and think about the spirit of, I hate when people say, oh, you're my mentor. I'm like, no, you're mine, because we should always think of it as an equal relationship where we're learning from each other. And if I think about some of the women in this room that have been incredibly impactful in my life and my career, I'll go to the back of the room to Melissa Lukey, who taught me more than I could have ever forgotten around my commercial opportunity. And I think about one of my very first boards that I served on with Laura Kale, who was just, taught me that maybe there's times that I could ask my questions in a different way and keep my mouth shut, and then I would be remiss not to call out my friends and colleagues from Fifth Third, because every one of the Fifth Third ladies that are here today have been just so meaningful and inspirational and supportive on the journey. And sometimes that's really hard, and so I hope you feel the same support from me that you've given to me. So that would be my mentorship.
Isn't it interesting that the names of your mentors never leave you?
Never.
You remember them forever and ever because they have that degree of impact on your life. But Vashti, you brought up something very interesting when you said that one of your mentors was a person who was suffering from imposter syndrome. Now, I will point out that imposter syndrome has nothing to do with crime or fraud, nor does it have anything to do with a medical condition. But it is a very, very common thing that women will feel, and sometimes women will be encouraged to feel that way. positively in a way that is deliberate or perhaps inadvertently. But imposter syndrome, of course, just relates to the idea that you question your abilities and you feel like you're pretending to be something that you really aren't, and somebody is going to discover it any minute and your secret will be out. And it can manifest itself in a number of ways. It can turn you into the expert who just never stops earning certificates and finding ways to make sure that you are constantly trying to know it all. It can also manifest itself in being sort of the superwoman type who will overdo everything because you're not able to set boundaries and because you believe that you have to be a perfectionist. And everything has to turn out exactly the way it should because you're unable to accept mistakes. And finally, it can turn a person into being a soloist who is just unable to ask for any help and who really believes that they are not just called to be perfect, but they are essentially supposed to be a natural genius. So you really can't let anybody know you're doing all of this studying in the background. So imposter syndrome is a real thing, and I'm interested in knowing if you've ever felt it or if you've been around someone who, as you indicated, clearly was in that category. And if so, how did you navigate yourself through that, or how did you navigate around the person who was exhibiting this? So Vashti, would you start since you brought it up?
Sure. So this is interesting because I mentioned about my mentor who went through that. I had not been someone who had experienced that before, even though I've had a lot of firsts and I do, people come to me and like, could you do this? I mean, I've done some big things in my career without the education or the experience, and pretty early on in my career. My first time experiencing this was very recent. It was actually just at the end of last year, when I was asked to step up and move into the global CHR role in my organization. And I knew I was being asked to do it because the organization was getting ready to go through a very tough time. And I'm known as the fixer. But I'm usually the yes person. And this was the first time where I paused. And I just was nervous about it. And I started to ask, like, why me? I don't think I'm cut out for this. Wow, this is global. Sure, I support these folks, I know these folks, but this is going to be a tough one. My company is a large global company, and it was going through a merger and acquisition, but in a very unique way because there was a part of the business that was struggling financially, and we knew there was going to have to be some tough restructuring. And I just kept asking, like, why me? I don't think I'm the right one for this. I'm kind of happy in my little box. And so I had not experienced that before, so it was the first time in my career and I really had serious doubts. It was a unique way that this came about where I got support was actually from my peers, my colleagues, my partner, HR business partners really said, if there's anybody in this organization that I'm going to work for, it's going to be you. You're already doing this. You do this every day, you just don't realize it. What are you waiting for? Go say yes. So it really came from, the great women around me that helped me get through that. But it's a real thing. And it's something that the world kind of fills you with these fears. And I learned in that moment, I'm like, this is not going to be. I'm not claiming this. I listened to my peers and I'm going to say yes. And I did. And we are indeed going through a very tough time. It's been a very hard year. But everything that I was worried about, I did it. And I'm still doing it. And so it's one of those things where anytime you hear somebody that's down on themselves or they're struggling through and they're asking why or their fear is good, push through it. It's okay to be fearful, but just don't let it take you down. And so I was my own example just last year going through that very same thing. So hearing all the stories today has been so empowering. So many amazing stories about detours and challenges and how you just push through. And it's funny how you look back and you're like, what was I afraid of? What was holding me back? It's always temporary. It's a temporary situation. You will get through it, power through, and it'll just be a memory, and you'll have more to celebrate than you will to fear. That was good.
I was in the listening. So yeah, I have in my career, in my 30-plus year career, and it was more with the American Cancer Society that I went through this syndrome when I was a little younger, and it was more of a structured environment. Today, PBS, I raise money, my team has to meet a goal, but we're more creative and the culture's more creative. So with the American Cancer Society, I did go through this and felt like, I'm gonna be found out, or why am I in this position? And so I evaluated those times in my life, and what I found out is during that time, my self-care was not as high as it should be. So I'm really into physical fitness, but was I doing the things that I should be doing, like daily prayer? That's important to me. Are you prayed up, is what my minister says to me. Are you prayed up? What does that mean? Is that daily? Is that, so that was important to me. Gratitude list. In my life, during the times when I keep a daily gratitude list, so at the end of the day, it could be a bad day, but there's also always things that you can find that you're extremely thankful for. So keeping that daily gratitude list. And then back when I was in a conference, it was in Texas, a woman said, you'll have bad days, and what I do is I keep a smile file. And I thought, boy, that's a good idea. When you're having a bad day, you go through that smile file. So I still have a paper smile file, and I have an electronic smile file. And I keep that up, so when good things happen, if I'm having a really kind of crappy day or feeling like, why should I be here, or why am I here, why am I this leader, I go through those files. So for me, it's just the self-care. I liked what you said, because I think it's looking for others who are younger too, and when you're mentoring someone, if they're feeling those feelings, we can be empowering to them, men or women, whomever, to make a difference in their lives.
I like the smile file. That's a good one. So has anybody seen the show Stranger Things? So there's the upside down, and there's the right side up, and there's the in-between. And I feel like most of my life I've lived in the in-between, because I'm living between the spot of wanting to be the person that I really am and wanting to be the person that I'm supposed to be. And what does that mean? And I have 4 daughters, as you heard, and one thing I've tried to help instill in them that I want them to be grounded to is there are times where we do need to meet others' expectations, but the most important person's expectation that you should be meeting is your own. You do not need to have validation from these other people to tell you you're good. It's nice if that comes along, but there's going to be people on the journey that will tell you you're good. There's going to be people on the journey that are going to tell you that you're bad, but what's most important is that you believe in how you feel. And to me, especially as a woman, it's probably the hardest. And so I live in the in-between, and I'm in that constant struggle of, am I going to go upside down, or am I going to stay right side up? So
that is awesome. And so maybe in those high moments when you're feeling really good about who you are, we should write those down and put that in our smile file.
Or in your notebook that you have in front of you, which would work as a smile file, I think, very adequately. So you've got some options there. Well, in addition to the challenges and the disruptions that everyday life brings, we've just had a once-in-a-100-year disruption. And I mentioned this in a talk I gave in this room yesterday, that what is always amazing to me is that in the aftermath of World War I and in the aftermath of the 1918 flu pandemic, the Sisters of St. Benedict said, I know what we should do. We should found a college to educate teachers. Who does that? Well, Women of Vision and Courage, that's who. And now we have just gone through a situation where there's a lot of conflict around the world that is seemingly ongoing. It's just never ending, even before the disaster in Ukraine that we're living with right now. And we had the COVID pandemic, which of course no one expected. We thought it was a 3-week and it'll be all over and we'll go back to our regular lives. And many of us have lost a lot of friends, relatives, individuals who may have been our mentors during this particular siege. And every profession, every business has been affected in some way. So I think it would be nice to talk about how you, in your professional life and your personal life, have found it necessary to pivot during this time, and how, unfortunately, COVID became transformative in many ways, and whether that was a positive or a negative in terms of what you see in the landscape that you work within. So, would you like to start, since you're nodding at these?
Oh, you want me to?
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Oh, okay.
I think that's called passing the buck, so just pick it up.
I got it. So, being in HR, this has definitely been, I think, we've become quite popular during COVID. It's definitely a very sad time, but I look at the positive sides of what COVID did, and my family personally, as well as professionally. I don't think I pivoted though. What COVID was for me as a leader of HR was an opportunity for me to lean in to all the things that leaders thought I was crazy about. Because now you're talking about core energy leadership. You're talking about leading with empathy. You're talking about being vulnerable, right? Now I can say things like bring love into work and treat the whole person, and I'm not the crazy person in the room. So for me, it was, I took advantage of it and leaned into those things and really just enhanced that. And I'm just gonna keep riding this wave as much as I can, because now I get to do what I've always loved to do, which is those things. It's become more coaches, really deal with the whole person and make sure that that's what we're catering to, have open conversations about the needs of mental health and mental illness and how that shows up at work. That's saying that HR is to police and policy restricting guidelines. Get rid of that. I love it because I get to now just help people bring their best selves and show up and find a place that they belong and do their best work. I don't care about your weaknesses because that's not why we brought you here. We brought to enhance your strengths. That's what we focus on. There's other people that will complement your weaknesses. That's why we believe in diversity. So for me, it was leaning in to what was happening into that shift, and I just hope that it doesn't shift away because this is where we should have always been. So COVID has definitely some challenges, and there was a tough transition to have to go overnight into a completely remote and go through all the things that we all lived through and experienced. But there was really good things out of that as well, because engagement increased, people got to connect at different levels, it leveled the playing field. I got to do really fun things like bring a comedian in. Things that you would never get investment in dollars for before. So I'm actually leaning in to that shift and that pivot.
Were you able to change any policies and procedures that will help perpetuate your leading in?
Absolutely. We got rid of performance reviews. We got rid of PTO. You take as much time as you need, you're an adult. You show up to work and you do what we ask you to do, and you do it when you want. It's a performance culture, not performance attendance. There's so many policy changes that I ran with that. That first 6 months, that whole place looked different. and we're not looking back. So absolutely, it was a great opportunity to shift and pivot from a policy standpoint, cultural standpoint, all of the above.
I just want to point out the fact that our HR team I've heard that.
Do they need medical attention at this point? That's a pretty shocking concept, isn't it? It's shocking to think along those lines.
You're in trouble.
No, you're not in trouble. No, there's no good, there's no bad, they're just what is. I think I heard somebody say that.
Indeed.
Yes.
It just is.
Yes. Sue Ellen.
So, yeah, I am excited about this question because with PBS, we're on all screens. And so we also have really great relationships with schools and the public. And so during the pandemic, it was really good for us because we were able to, a week before shutdown, our chief programming officer changed all of our daytime programming. So it was segmented into age groups for kids. Our, out of 72 employees, we have about 13 who are teachers, who are into the education. And what they did is they asked teachers, what do you need? And so one of the things they needed is how to teach with technology. So we did so many virtual seminars. And you know, one of our education staff said, in the past we might have 400 teachers show up for a session. One of the sessions they did had 1,700 educators, 4 from Pakistan. And it's like, that's what we should be doing. We also so after school was out, we did virtual camps for kids. We're big in STEM, and we're also big in literacy. And so because of all the work, and we were doing this work not alone, we have 3 PBS stations. I work for CET and Think TV, but there's 6 other in the state of Ohio, so we were working statewide. Well, the Ohio Department of Education came to us and said, wow, you guys have done so great. Why don't you tell us what you can do and apply for a grant? So we did, and they granted us $5 million, and so our stations are leading the effort, and we have these great deliverables. We even hired an evaluation team so that we can make sure that we're doing the right thing, and it's a 2-year project. So it's really been good for us. The other thing, and I'll be fast, but in the development department, we've done more partnership fundraising. We've never, in my 30-plus career, it's always like mine, it's my money, even though we do good things. We went out and we have partnerships with the Holocaust and Humanities Center. We have a partnership with the Cincinnati Chamber Orchestra. We have a partnership with the Cincinnati May Festival, and there's one more that we Urban Consulate, which is a group of Black leaders that talks about equity and education. And so we did all these partnerships that we never would have done. So it's been really good for us, and I think it's just because who we are that we have access into everybody looks at a screen a day, and we have the content that fills that.
That's great. So remember how I mentioned I like to do things the hard way? So why not just make a job change, move to a new city in the middle of a pandemic? It seemed like a great idea. So I actually moved to Louisville. I started my position in September, October of 2020. So, and my first kind of full week in the job. So Louisville certainly had COVID issues they were dealing with, and then as many of you may be aware, they had some social issues that they were trying to address as well. It's still to this day an incredibly segregated city, but it's getting better. And coming into just this amazing situation where we were at the worst of the worst. There was no one downtown. So I'm in a downtown office building, I'm staying in downtown hotels. I mean, my standard joke with the hotels I stayed in would be, how many of us are there tonight? You know, and it would be 5 or 7. And I remember one night I was in the Hyatt, and I walked in and I said to the lady, it was like 9 o'clock, and I walk in and I said, how many are there? And she said 7. And that was the night where I'm laying in bed, I'm like, are we all on the same floor? Are we on different floors? Are there gonna be like people running through the halls? Like, what's gonna happen? I mean, it's just the funniest like things that go through your mind. But so no restaurants, no in-person meetings. I'm in a new city, a new job. I don't even get to meet the team. We had a Zoom call to welcome me. I mean, it was sort of like, you know, there's 200 people on a Zoom call, you don't get to see them. But here was the inspiration out of all of that for me. What I learned was, it was an opportunity for Louisville, Kentucky, as well as the rest of the world, to take a moment and to pause and think about what they want to be in the future. So I like to say, when people tell me about what they're trying to get back to, I always say, I don't know what that is. Because I came here at literally the time where there were no people, and all I know is I want to be a part of what we're building for the future. I want to be a part of where we're headed. I don't want to spend a lot of time trying to get back to whatever it was, because obviously what it was wasn't working. Whether that was in Louisville, Kentucky, or across the country or around the world, there are things that we should think about, and I hope that it's human nature to want to gravitate back to what feels comfortable, but I still hope to this day that all of us can spend more time thinking about what we learned from that opportunity that catapults us ahead.
Well said, well said. Well, I've just seen the 5-minute and the hook comes out sign come up. And there was another question I was going to raise, so I'm going to exercise the moderator prerogative, and I'll take this question and you'll see why. Since we have women of all ages in this room, is it ever too late to introduce innovation in our lives, or too early? I can answer both sides of that spectrum, and I promise to speed talk so that we can stick with the time frame. A couple of people have asked me about my story, and I wasn't going to tell it because I really wanted to spend the time with these three important ladies, but I'm going to give you the Cliff's Notes version very, very quickly. I grew up with a university professor father who worked at UC for 43 years. So I grew up on college campuses. There was never a question about whether I would go to college. There was a question about where, because free tuition was at UC. I ended up at Villa Madonna College in downtown Covington, which clearly I did not choose because of the gorgeous campus. However, I fell in love with the place immediately, hiking all over the streets of Covington. When I was a junior and we had just moved to this campus, I became the first woman in more than 20 years to be elected president of the student government. I couldn't believe it. And I really couldn't believe it when the dean of students said, well, at least we'll probably have some very nice tea parties now. Thank you, Father. That gets me off to a great start. However, there was another father, besides the one who sired me, who said, you can be anything you want to be, and besides the father who talked about tea parties, and that was Father John Murphy, the president of the college. And he immediately decided he was going to be my mentor. First thing he taught me was how to drink at parties. A little bourbon, a lot of ginger ale, and just keep refilling the ginger ale. I had a fabulous year because he put me on the board of trustees as the student representative. He put me on the steering committee for the dedication. And on that very special day in September 1968, I met President Lyndon B. Johnson. And I spent significant time with him. And 3 weeks later, I got an invitation telegram saying, the President and Mrs. Johnson hope you will join them for a National Council on the Arts reception. So I did what any 20-year-old college student would do. I called the White House. And I said, is this for real or is somebody playing a trick on me? It was for real. I went to the White House by myself, by the way. They said, no, you cannot bring a date. You have to come by yourself. Here I am in the White House, sitting next to Eileen Saarinen, the widow of Eero Saarinen, who did the Arch in St. Louis, behind Dave Brubeck. Duke Ellington was over there, and I was the only nobody in the room. So everybody kept coming up to me saying, so, are you in the arts? Are you in New York or Los Angeles? And I said, I'm in Fort Mitchell, Kentucky. And they said, where's that? And they looked to see if I was wearing shoes, I think. But I sat in the east room of the White House, and I looked around at all of these people, and I said, why am I getting a degree so I have something I can fall back on when there's a lot out there to do? So I finished my degree as an English major, won a fellowship to Catholic University in Washington, D.C., and was very happy there until Sir Walter Scott came into my life. Has anybody here read Rob Roy? Don't. Just don't. I was working on a PhD in English, and I had cruised the offices in Washington thinking that National Geographic would love to have me. And everywhere I went, people said, with a PhD in English, you'll make a fabulous secretary. That was almost as bad as the Tea Party remark. One day, reading Rob Roy, trying to read Rob Roy, I really didn't get too far. I saw a building with all kinds of people going in. And I walked in and I said, what is this place? And they said, it's a speech and hearing center. I said, what's that? I mean, I can hear, I can speak. What's a speech and hearing center? I had no exposure to it. So that relates to what did you know about when you were in college? I spent the rest of the day observing, and I went back to my apartment. I was working as a bank teller too, part-time at the First National Bank of Washington, and got in the shower. I do my best thinking in the shower. And that night, it was a really long shower. And I walked out to the gal that I was sharing the apartment with, and I said, I'm resigning my fellowship tomorrow. And she said, you're crazy. And I said, no, this is the most impulsive decision I probably will ever make in my life. And most of the time it's true. But I'm not going to keep doing this because I have found what I want.